Hello, welcome to Worse Than the Borg, the Star Trek podcast for everyone. Each week, we unpack new episodes of Star Trek with Star Trek fans, new and old. We also showcase and raise funds for causes near and dear to us in the name of solidarity, reconciliation, and justice. I am your captain, Shane Holland. I am here, as always, with my number one, Ron Sly. Hi, Ron.
Hello, Shane.
And of course, our chief engineer, Ravi Joshi. Hey, Ravi.
Hello to all of you.
We are here to talk about this week's episode of Star Trek Discovery, and I am so excited for this crossover event where we get to welcome aboard this week's special guest, Ambassadors Thom Stoneman and Elliot Tilachek from the podcast Do You Queer What I Queer? We are collectively worse than the Borg. Ron, would you be able to lead us off with our commitment to reconciliation before we dive right in?
Absolutely, Captain. This mission log was recorded on Treaty 13 land, and the participants are committed to reconciliation here on Earth. We believe the United Federation of Planets would fully support the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. All tuned-in Terrans are encouraged to participate in the direct action discussed later in this log. And Elliot and Thom, do you have anything to add? I think you're here with us in Toronto.
Yes, we are here with you in Toronto. I just wanted to add that we are currently occupying the Dish with One Spoon territory, which was a traditional land acknowledgement between the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas, which includes, of course, European settlers, of which I myself am a third-generation white settler on this land.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I don't think we've talked about the Dish with One Spoon wampum on this podcast before, and it's I probably should have put it right into the land acknowledgement because it's very Star Trek-y. It's a commitment to not taking more than you need and sharing with the people around you, even though you have different culture. So thank you for sharing that.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you so much. That really does fit perfectly into Star Trek, into this week's episode, and to who I think we want to be as a podcast group. So welcome, Thom and Elliot. I am so happy that you could both be here with us today, virtually. And right off the bat, I think I know the answer, but please, could you tell me a little bit about your history with Star Trek? Let's go to you, Elliot.
My history
first.
is zero. Actually, it might be worse than zero. I don't know what your opinions are, but I'm pretty sure I've only seen the 2 movies with Chris Pine in it, and that's it. There are 3. So there you go. I've seen 2 of the 3 movies, and that's period. Yeah. So, and then of course the episode for today, and that's it.
Wow, talk about
I should say though, I'm a
first.
huge science fiction fan, so even watching the episode, we'll get into this, but I was like, holy shit.
I'm curious. So if you're a science fiction fan,
awesome.
What has been the barrier to Star Trek? Is it just never grabbed your interest?
I'm relatively obsessive, and it's one of those things that has just such a backlog. It's like, I don't even know if I currently have time to get into it. It's like Tom's been trying to get me into Grey's Anatomy, and I don't think I would see anyone.
Why are so many gays
people
circling the Grey's Anatomy drain right now?
What else are we supposed to do?
Don't expose me on a Star Trek podcast about Grey's Anatomy.
There is literally no overlap in those 2 subjects. And that brings me to Thom. Thom, hello. What is your relationship with Star Trek? Pretty similar, I'm guessing?
A little similar. I do have a few things to add. I'm also a huge nerd, comic book and comic movie Buffy guy. And I would say Star Trek has always been in my sphere, but like Elliot, I've never sort of dove in because I've been scared of it as well. I have seen those movies. I did see the pilot of this new show 3 years ago, and a few after that, but not in a couple of years. Although, much to my chagrin, because I wish I had been caught up, because I feel like this episode would have made a lot more sense to me. But I'm so into the world. I'm so into the world.
That is awesome to hear. I cannot wait to talk all about it. Usually I would pop in some Star Trek related news, but folks, I'm going to be honest, I don't really have anything this week. The only thing I do have is something that a coworker lent me. I mentioned that I'm doing this podcast, and of course we Trekkies find each other. And she said to me, well, I'll just bring in my card collection. I was like, card collection? She hands me this thick ass binder, which is about half the size of my head. And it's literally filled from front to back with Star Trek collector's cards.
Oh my
You can't
goodness.
see any of them, but like these are in-depth pictures from like every season of The Next Generation, every season of the original series. I have like one of my favorites right here. I'm gonna see if it shows up on camera.
Oh my God. Our Instagram feed is about to fill up.
Absolutely. So
wow.
Can't believe I wasted a decade of my life collecting hockey cards. I could have been doing this. I could have been doing this.
And my Pog collection is way heavier.
I mean, they're made of metal. These are paper. That's legit. Yeah, so that's probably the most Star Trek thing that happened in my life.
Wait, sorry. Can I just clarify? Was that a gift or just like? Can you look at this?
The contracts of the term have not been agreed to yet.
I see. And is there a trading card of Whoopi Goldberg?
Oh, 100% there is. I mean, I might have to spend the next hour, which is this podcast length, looking for that picture.
Find it on a break.
Find it.
And I just have one other follow-up question, which is there a Will Wheaton card?
Oh, honey,
And
that's the first one I found.
Okay, what are the like politics on me being obsessed with him sexually?
That is allowed, and
okay.
I mean, if that sweater doesn't get you turned on, I don't know what will.
If you're able to somehow channel that energy to get Will Wheaton to be a guest on this podcast, there's no problem. This
you know
is a
what?
great
I'll
idea.
see what I can do.
Oh,
I did just after looking at that card, I did just climax, so I'm in a bit of a like down state. But let's continue.
Well, when you recover.
Yes. Well, I don't have much to add, so you know what? After the episode discussion, be sure to help support this week's direct action. But let's take a very short break, and we will return with what is going to be an epic breakdown of the latest episode of Star Trek.
Queen.
Oh, Queen, yeah.
You
Welcome
liar.
back.
You dirty liar. Shane's told us on the break that he did not find a Guinan card, but he did.
You're gonna have to rebuild trust here for sure.
I hope that I can do that over the course of this episode, the same way that Michael Burnham rebuilds her trust in the Federation. Welcome back to Worse Than the Borg. This week we're discussing Star Trek Discovery Season 3, Episode 7, Unification III. It was directed by John Dudkowski and written by Kristen Bayer. Ravi, can you tell us what happened in this episode?
Absolutely. Today's episode description was provided by Wikipedia, adapted by Shane. Thank you to Shane. And be warned, from this point on, this episode will contain major spoilers, so be warned. After studying several black boxes, Burnham believes she can find the source of the burn with more data. She wants access to the Federation project SB-19, a possible space travel alternative to dilithium, developed by the unified Vulcan and Romulan people on Ni'Var. They believe that SB-19 caused the burn and do not want to give the data to the Federation, who they have left. Vance believes that Burnham can convince them otherwise, since her brother Spock began the process of unifying the Vulcans and Romulans. At Ni'Var, Burnham invokes the Tulkat Inket, a Vulcan trial intended to verify her scientific claim to the SB-19 data. She is represented by her mother, Gabrielle, who was previously trapped in the future and has since joined the Kowat Milad, a sect of Romulan warrior nuns. Gabrielle makes Burnham confront her own intentions and sense of confusion about her destiny, leading Burnham to withdraw from the trial. Impressed by this, Ni'Var President Turina gives Burnham the SB-19 data. Meanwhile, Saru names Tilly as his first officer. And that is an episode recap in just under a minute. Thank you. Back to you, Shane.
I mean, most of those words are foreign to us Star Trek viewers dedicated. I can only imagine what that just sounded like to someone like Thom or Elliot. So Thom, your first thoughts?
I'm happy to admit that I did almost follow all of that.
Oh.
Because after I watched the episode, I did some reading, and I had no idea the dilithium shortage was so epic.
Oh yeah. Like, it literally ended up in every ship in space, like literally in warp, just exploding. It must have been a massively destructive event that cost billions of lives.
So we are to assume that dilithium is a natural resource.
Yes.
That does not what's the
Non-renewable?
smart word?
Correct.
Non-renewable. Thanks. That's why
Yes.
Elliot is here. And
Yes, that's why we invited Elliot here. Thank you, Elliot.
so non-renewable natural resource. So what is your take on that, Shane?
I mean, Star Trek has dealt with this before. They have dealt with the fact that this is a non-renewable resource. In Discovery, they have a character played by Tig Notaro, who I am so upset that neither of you got to see in this episode. But she was responsible for making a way to like recrystallize dilithium so that they could use it again. And then in the Next Generation, there's a whole episode about how warp speed is destroying the fabric of the universe, and so they have to introduce speed limits, and there's a lot of episodes about natural disasters and climate change and global warming in every series of the show. So this is not a new subject, but this is definitely the most disastrous outcome of that subject. Ron?
It does seem that this is going to be an overarching theme for the rest of this series, if I may be so bold, because the conversations with the president indicate that the Federation, had been sort of leaving people behind on its quest to bring everybody along. So even in the future, where they something that makes Star Trek kind of so attractive is it's like the fully automated gay space communism, right? Like you just go to your the machine that gives you what you want. Come on.
Vending machine?
No.
Job machine?
No, the replicator. Jeez.
I think that Ronnie just said fully automated gay space communism and just got distracted from that point on.
I know, right?
That's what happened to me.
Dream. So they've destroyed their trust with all of these other worlds, like 300 worlds. Thom, I saw your fingers go up there.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, and like this is me boiling everything down to its dumbest form, which is where I exist. I shouldn't use the word dumb, but I just did. And
that's a tie-in to Do You Queer What I Queer listeners. Go back and listen to at the end of season 3 to catch the discussion on those words.
Thanks, Ron. That's some good PR. That's some good PR. And but I really appreciate, and this is what I love so much about not sci-fi in particular, but like other fantasy series that I like, or subgenres, and that it connects it to real life things, that like it's not just spaceships shooting at each other. There's something much deeper on a human level, on an environmental level, that really connects me to the story. And I know this is like obviously Star Trek 101 to all of you, so it's ridiculous me saying it, but like I appreciate as a non-watcher that I can almost hook in right away, because I understand that when I see this crew, that there are no straight white men on this ship, which is fantastic. Like that's exactly what I want. And my little anecdote was that my roommate, who I hope is not listening, who usually misses the point on these sorts of things, was watching it with me, and he said, I don't believe that any of these people would command a spaceship. And I just looked at him and I kind of laughed and I said, I think you've just hit the nail on the head of why this show exists and why it's awesome.
When you've accidentally nailed the nail on the head. Wow.
The self-aware wolf.
Incredible.
Yeah.
No, you have hit it right on. Like it truly is meant to be that. Like none of these people are supposed to be what we think of when we think of leaders, or even crew or even just a television cast. And then for this episode to relate so directly to things that we're facing in real life, it truly is Star Trek 101. That is the ethos of nearly every episode of Star Trek. And they do, I think, this might be one of the best Star Trek Discovery episodes that we've seen
Star Trek
yet.
episodes of all
Yeah,
time. So it's a fun jumping in point. I want to hear Elliot's first first take.
I have like Star Trek 101 questions that I can like pepper throughout, so I don't need to do them all here. But on the dilithium thing, I mean, like we literally have a lithium shortage right now. Like that will be one of the next, large issues of climate change. So that was really interesting to see. And then also, Shane, I want to circle back to what you were saying about, did you say warp drive is ruining the fabric of space?
Yes.
Okay, I have so many questions about how warp drive works, and like, is that something that's addressed? And is it like, do they like fold space and then move through the folds, or are they just moving really quickly, or like what's going on? That's my question.
Okay, so in universe, you create a warp bubble where space and time doesn't really exist for you the way it does in the universe. And then yeah, you basically, I think, fold the universe in at the front and expand it behind you, and that creates faster than light travel, and there are magnitudes to that. So warp 1 is the speed of light, but warp 2 is 2 times the factor of the speed of light, and so on and so forth. And warp speed was determined, like, if you go too fast, you start tearing apart the universe. And so they put on like a galaxy-wide speed limit, which they break in nearly every episode because they have to get places fast. And Discovery is truly like the most unique ship because it does not travel with warp speed. It travels across like this mushroom network, basically.
I have so many questions about the mycelial network. I was so excited when I heard that.
And it is run by a gay man, and we stan, obviously, who is also possibly just the meanest character in this entire series, by the way. Before we move on, I just have to point out that the writers have once again done Stamets dirty by making him the villain in the episode. When he tells Tilly that he can never imagine her as a leader, my jaw hit the floor, and I literally cried out, I can't believe they're doing this to him.
Did he say, because I that stood out for me, but he said something which is, maybe I heard it differently, and I thought I heard him say, I find the idea of taking directions from you a little weird.
Yes.
I didn't hear it as, I don't endorse you as a leader, which of course the rest of the episode covered, but I heard it differently because I don't mind that he said that in that moment, because it seemed like he was being genuinely honest. So I didn't hear it as a dismissal, but did you hear it? I mean, I could be just wrong. I just heard it differently.
I mean, I think what I actually heard is like he was going to continue with his sentence and he got interrupted, and there would have been some resolution right then and there, but that's not how plot and TV works, so that they had to create some kind of tension between them. But
I took it as a split the difference between the two of you.
Ah, okay, good. So there is somewhere in between where that landed. I'm glad to hear that.
Can I
just say?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I
Ravi.
just say that Aaron, our last week's guest, had to jump in with similar levels of like appreciation for Star Trek, and had to jump in on, I have to think, one of the stinkerest of stinker episodes. And you two are very privileged to have taken this episode, because this one was a riot. This one
Honestly,
was so
felt
good.
that.
Oh yeah, no, this was cram packed.
The
Last
first
episode
20
was a
minutes
real...
of, like, it was just every time they turned a corner, it was like, what? Like,
something new was happening, and there's so much science fiction packed into the first 20 minutes of this episode. You get to see the ship. So Thom and Elliot, recently the ship went from being in the 23rd century to being in the 32nd century. They did a big time leap. So literally everything is new for everyone who's ever seen Star Trek. And so we finally get to see all of these parts working with all of their new upgraded programmable matter, which means that the floor can just appear beneath your feet and you can control the ship just by waving your hand. It was all so awesome to see it in action. I was really pumped. Ron, you clearly were too. What did you think, Elliot, as a fan of sci-fi in general?
I just assumed that everything that I was seeing wasn't new for anyone else, and I was just so excited to go along for the ride. And like, honestly, I think the mycelial network thing was the most exciting for me, especially because I've just recently reading about the panspermia theories and how humans may have came from like mycelial networks in space, and I just love that they're tapping into that.
And so Paul Stamets is actually the name. So Paul Stamets is the gay man character. But the name is actually a real life scientist who studies mushrooms. So they truly did try to tie it straight in there.
I love that.
Yeah.
Ronnie coming in with the trivia. I thought that was my job. I love
Sorry,
it. Thank
sorry.
you. No. Thank you. It's awesome.
Well, I mean, if it intrigues you, Elliot, I was going to say, like, part of my pitch to people about Star Trek right now is you can start at season 3, episode 1 of Discovery and be totally fine. Right. You don't need to have any of the background. They're doing a good job at like making us as the nerds happy without being, hopefully, I mean, you can share your opinion on this, both of you, but without being too out there confusing and requiring too much Star Trek background. But that said, if you're intrigued by the Mycelial Network, seasons 1 and 2 have a lot about it, including, you know, how their use impacts it. And there's also a giant tardigrade.
I was just gonna say, because I watch shows from like an acting teacher lens, and I gotta say the acting is so good without being over the top. That's a lot of words that those actors have to cram into their mouths. And
this was a dialogue heavy episode.
Yeah, very much so. And like sell the intentions and like put so much emotion behind some things. And probably the actors, I'm sure you would know this, but are in front of some sort of green screen the entire time they're doing this. And I just, it's fascinating, especially the main girl.
Sonequa Martin Green is a absolute treasure.
She had everything that like a leading person should have on that show. Like she really nailed all the beats. She was likable she was badass, like, and that's just like the actor's really great job, I think is my point. And it was like lovely seeing her with her mom.
Okay, there's so much to unpack there. So obviously the white male fan base of Star Trek has not been as kind to her as we are.
Fuck them.
Yeah, exactly.
This show is not for them.
There's our explicit language warning for the episode. Deserved. But I gotta say, in season 1, season 2, she plays like a pretty complex character in the Star Trek like universe. So she's a human who's grown up on Vulcan after suffering a like pretty extensive trauma, and so she like tries to get into the Vulcan culture. And basically, we see over the course of the 3 years her like kind of deprogramming herself very slowly, through the entire series, and it just is so great to watch her work. And if you choose to continue to watch, and you really want to, start at season 1, episode 1, because season 1, episode 3 is such a payoff for that. And then the mother. I don't know, Ravi, do you want to give us some background on?
Hold on, before we go to Gabrielle Burnham, Elliot has been like dying to say something.
I just have honestly 2 quick questions. The first one on this topic: do you think that incels are going to be really mad about how they said how much of the man Spock became was a result of who his sister was?
They're very mad.
They're gonna get so many. Okay, I just wanted to check with that.
Love it.
Yeah.
The second thing, and
we hope
we can like table this because it was more about the acting comment, but was there sexy energy between Saru and the president of what is it, Nav? What is it?
There was.
Navarre,
yeah,
absolutely.
Are they gonna fuck, or was that just like Doug Jones being like the sexy fish person again?
Yes, Doug Jones is a sexy fish person, and I follow his Instagram, and he turns me on every day. And he also he does yoga poses in front of his window, and you can see like Steam Whistle Brewery, and I walk by there every day. And so now I'm just gonna walk by and be like, is he looking at me? Because I'm looking at him. So yes, Doug Jones doing incredible work on this show, in this season, in this episode in particular. And I really hope that he and Tarina become a thing, because he deserves some love.
He's so sexy. That's all I'm gonna say.
Sexy.
Tom, your face suggested that you didn't realize that he was from Toronto, and it's another feature of this show that almost everybody you're watching on screen, I mean, there are some American actors on there, but almost everybody, wall to wall, are Canadian actors, often Toronto actors.
I just recently found that out. Yes,
it's a really cool feature of this, and the Discovery set is in the Portlands, just south of where I am. So it's such a cool tie-in. It's a fun part of the show.
The last thing that I wanted to say that I was really looking forward to see Michelle, and I didn't get to see her.
Oh, you really missed
no,
out.
you really missed out.
Okay, feel better now.
Now I'm supposed to do a quick recap on Gabrielle.
Yes.
Oh, yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
sorry.
But there's a lot to okay, here, can I just say this, that Burnham's history is, I don't want to spoil too
Maternal.
much. There's a lot. There's a lot that you can glean from this, from the first two seasons. So I'll say this, that Burnham was estranged through her upbringing from her mother because of an incident, a violent incident involving the Klingons, and they didn't meet beyond the age of, I think it was 7 or a very young age. They didn't spend most of their time bringing up, and that Burnham was adopted by Spock's family on Vulcan from that point on. So there's a really, I won't go into too many of the details, but it's something that really adds to the character, and the
But
actress who's from The Wire is just also an incredible delivery of this character too.
Yeah.
Thank you for explaining that, because I picked up on all of that. That's how good the acting is. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
not obviously not that specific, but I was like, oh, everything you just described makes sense based on the performances that I saw.
Totally.
Uh,
Totally.
They make Sonequa Martin Green cry in every episode now because she is so good at, like, she can be happy, she can be sad, she can be like frightened beyond belief, and she just gets that single tear rolling.
And the nerds are so mad about the crying. It's like they've never seen an emotion before in their life. You know, we love it.
Ravi?
Can I also jump in, and because we've been part of the Doug Jones fan club. We are the Doug Jones fan club entirely, but also Tilly, whose actress name I'm forgetting. We're briefly
Mary
Wiseman.
Thank you, Mary Wiseman.
I love
Forgive me.
her. I love her.
Oh, she's so great. And there were two lines that stood out for me was in the one scene with her and Burnham, was when she said, "My choice." 2 words that just totally leveled the whole conversation.
Oh,
and when she said at the end, "I don't know what would happen if you went away, or if you had not come back." And it was those 2 lines that took what I could think would be like pretty trite transactional TV writing, and it just turned it into this real thing where she was like, they're friends, they're close friends, there's like tension there. And Tilly's delivery of that like conversation was so pitch perfect. Like,
Couldn't
that's
agree
my
more.
choice.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
And Mary Wiseman was fantastic,
Yeah.
but the writing was so good because it felt like a real conversation that actually would have happened between 2 friends.
Oh, I love that. I really love that. Elliot?
Really fast for the Doug Jones fan club thing. Tom, I think this might be the most exciting too, but did you know that he was the monster in Hush? He was like the main Hush monster in Buffy. So like, that's beyond. A question on topic though. Tilly, as someone who like doesn't really get her characterization, like, is there something like sketchy there with her, or is there something in the background that is like stewing, or is she just like a conflicted person?
So she started in season 1 as a cadet. And so she only got promoted to ensign recently, which is the lowest rank. So a lot of the tension she was feeling in that is she's basically the most junior crew member on the ship.
Right, like imposter syndrome kind of.
Yes.
Okay, I wasn't sure
there's
she
a
was
whole
like bad.
episode devoted to imposter syndrome in another season. They have really dealt into Tilly not feeling totally confident yet, but her confidence has been growing, and this truly was it felt 3 years in the making, this episode, for her character. I was going to say that I always love these fun Star Trek scenes where they're like doing astrometrics and like pinpointing a ship's location using the triangulation method, and then they have like a real heart-to-heart and they like end up crying to each other. This has happened in every series of Star Trek that has ever existed, and they have really done a great job in Star Trek Discovery of keeping that alive.
As someone who literally gets off on genre bending, I can definitely agree with you.
Literally, Tom said, just so literally. Yeah. Fantastic. Sexy.
I stand by it.
Love that.
Can I also
Ravi?
say that? Yeah, I just want to say that Tilly's performance in this last episode, keen listeners of Worse Than the Borg who have been tuned in will note that I said that I think that Tilly was had sort of plateaued. The character was not really doing anything, and this just sort of, I think that was a facet of bad writing as much as anything, but I think that in this episode really turned it on its head and took that sort of empty plateauing, that kind of stalling, and turned it into something. There was momentum again for her character, and I'm really glad that happened because we needed this. And the final scene, or the scene where say yes. Oh my gosh, that was so fun. I enjoyed that a lot.
Say
Oh my
yes to
God.
the dress, Tilly. Say yes to the dress.
That part was a little hokey to me, but I don't care. Give it to me.
No,
Give it to me.
Did I
I'm
miss
with you
the
on that
hate
one,
to
Tom.
say yes?
They
Yeah.
addressed it though. She said, "Did I miss the fun say yes part?" So it was like,
Oh, that was so
it's like you can like
cool.
make fun of it.
Totally.
I
Go ahead.
actually am willing to retcon a lot of our opinions from the last episode discussion. So as you know, Elliot and Tom, we've kind of just we complained a lot about what they were doing and didn't really see what the writers were doing. But they truly set us up for a trapdoor. You know, like prior to this, we kind of like think maybe Burnham's mom caused the burn. We kind of think that Burnham is like this season is going to be about her leaving the Federation. You know, Tilly was getting dull, and they just were like, nope, we're going to resolve all those questions in the next episode. And it truly was like a mid-season finale, right? Like we've kind of reset a lot of the storylines for the rest of the show.
I mean, this truly is the mid-season. We are in episode 7 of, I think it's 13 or 14 this year. So yeah, and I think we talked about last episode too, how it felt like we were just waiting for the other shoe to drop, and they certainly did do it. I was also a little struck by the fact that this past 6 episodes, we've been dealing with Michael Burnham not having a sense of home or place in this new universe, or at least with her old family, and how quickly that all gets resolved in this one episode. She truly does a 180 in 45 minutes. I thought that was pretty fascinating, but I bought it. I think that the whole tribal council / library reading scene where the Vulcans are just tearing her apart did a lot of exposition work for this show. But I want to hear everyone's opinion on the tribal council heard round the universe. And I want to go to someone who I know is a Survivor fan, which could be any number of you actually, but I'm going to go to Ron first. Did you love the tribal council of it all?
Well, so I actually didn't make the tribal council connection. I more thought of it was like defend your PhD dissertation, which was a very Vulcan thing to do, just like put it in all this pomp and circumstance. And you know, this is a classic Star Trek, you know, like aliens on trial. You're stripping it down and having that like philosophical discussion about what you like want to accomplish with the actions that you're taking. And you know, there's probably like one of these great episodes in, you know, almost every season. So I really did love that. You know, but I'm curious from our guests, you know, like I think you've got the sci-fi bug. This kind of setup is very like the lawyers in space kind of is a Star Trek thing. Did you find it, like, I found it so engaging all the way through because I've signed up for it, but like, did you like it or not?
What appealed to me about it was that I love that they kept on sort of referring to having to state your case as using only logic or using only facts to back it up. And then yet it wasn't really happening even on either side. Like it ended up becoming quite emotional for everyone. And like they weren't appealing to logic at a lot of times. And I just found that really fascinating because when I first heard it, I was like, oh, I kind of want to hear them argue. And then they did.
And it was like the most exciting part of the show, it turns out. Elliot, how do you feel?
Yeah, I agree with that too. And even I like the way that they framed that. I think it was the president who said, you know, even science cannot be separated from cultural and political context, because the idea is that you're going to have this like objective logic-based, you know, conversation around science, like with a capital S, and you know, even talking about like decolonization and understanding that nothing exists in a vacuum. And it was just kind of a really like interesting tie-in point to the unlearning of systems that people are doing right now. Like there is no such thing as an objective science. It's always going to benefit those who created it for a specific reason. And in that, and I really like the way they frame that.
Yeah, go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, and I think that's a great analysis and exactly what they were trying to do, given the lore. So these two species, the Vulcans and the Romulans, were separated in kind of prehistory. And then they find later on through the series, you know, Shane could probably do a better explanation of the unification theme here. But they are more or less like one species, and the sun from the Romulan solar system explodes, and so they all need to go somewhere. And something that Jean-Luc Picard and Spock are working on in their later life is the reunification of these two species. And the Vulcans are very well known for their logical mindset. Everything is very strictly logic, and most of the rest of the series, we don't get any deviation from that at all. The Romulans are much more emotionally driven, and they have they've come to reckon with this like duality. And I actually saw a comment from a Métis person online talking about how so there were 3 representatives there. There was a Vulcan, a Romulan, and then somebody who represented the perspective of a mixed person. So I think it was really clever that they were able to make this like very relevant social commentary, but it's very deeply connected with the like lore of the season. This is a story that's like been going on for 50 years.
Wow, great breakdown. That was amazing.
Yeah. And then there was a spaceship.
Pew pew. That was incredible. Ravi, do you want to give us one last?
I just want to say this is the way to do fan service. I was so filled to the brim with excitement and intrigue. There was no sort of patronizing review, like return of characters. I mean, yes, there was Spock, but this was the introduction of new characters. I thought the President, Tarina, is a really interesting character I want to hear more from, but just the unfolding of the unraveling of all of the politics that have happened over the last 900 years on Vulcan, and how that's put before you. It was just so incredible and exciting to dive right back in, and you're thinking of all you've learned in the past. So it was, I hope, inviting for people who are watching it for the first time. But if you've been watching Star Trek for 15 years, it added novelty, it added familiarity. It was all of that packed into one scene. I was really riveted by how well they kind of put that together. This is fan service at its best. It's like dignified fan service as opposed to normally the sort of patronizing drivel that's normally doled out. I'm looking at you, Star Wars. Anyway,
He said it.
Wait, are you talking about when Dr. Shepard comes back on Grey's Anatomy this season?
You shouldn't be here. We have talked for nearly half an hour about this, so I'm going to say we take a very quick break, and we'll come back with our commitment to reconciliation and our segment What the Trek. So yeah, we'll be right back. Every week we pick a different organization that makes a positive impact in their community, and we make a donation to them as part of our commitment to reconciliation. Last week, we supported Glad Day Bookshop and their Glad Day Lit program. Ron, do you want to tell us who we're focusing on today?
Absolutely. Thank you, Captain. We are supporting the Black Legal Action Center this week. They are a nonprofit community legal clinic that provides free legal service for low or no income Black residents of Ontario. We encourage all of our tuned in Terran listeners to join us in supporting this cause. You can donate at www.blacklegalactioncenter.ca.
Awesome. Thank you, Ron. Yes, please do support the awesome work that the Black Legal Action Center does. So each week, we always ask our guest panelists, what the Trek? What to you as very casual viewers made absolutely no sense or was morally questionable or otherwise totally confusing about this episode, this series, or even the whole damned franchise? So let's start with you, Thom. What's the Trek?
Oh, I see. That's not vague at all. No, I'm joking. What, in your opinion, caused the dilithium scarcity?
The burn.
Oh, what caused the burn?
What caused the burn?
Honestly, I think that they are building to Michael Burnham having been the cause of the burn by trying to seek out its origin, and that's why it's called the motherfucking burn, because it's literally her name.
Wow. Okay, that question was locked and loaded.
I've thought about it a lot.
Dropping knowledge. Holy.
I love that.
Ravi, do you have a different theory? As I don't have any theory at all.
Well, I like that the idea that it's being triangulated. I've really loved the sort of like, going on a hunt and triangulating the data. It hasn't revealed anything. I don't know. I was thinking that there would be some nefarious plot building up to like a new villain of some kind, that they source the burn back to a new villain of some sorts. But Shane just kind of won up. I can't think of a better argument for that. The only thing I'll say is that they kind of did a lot of that retro, like that timeline. Oh, you caused this in the second season. So I'm only disagreeing because I kind of hope that they don't retread on that carpet. It's a little bare, and I'd like for them to go in a different direction. But that's kind of the fun part about the burn, is I have no fucking clue. I have no idea where this is going.
Duly noted, and I retract my praise for Shane's answer.
I mean, I have a second theory. I think the Federation actually caused the burn, and that's what they're building. That's kind of what they've been building to for the past 6 episodes, is that it's the Federation who's kind of sketchy and not giving the full details of what's going on, not everyone else. So I think that's what it's going to actually come down to. But personally, I would just love for it to be called the burn because Michael Burnham did it. Go ahead, Thom.
Okay, so the Federation, that's like the official space group, right?
Mm-hmm, yes.
And are they the man? Are they the man?
Yes.
Should we be fighting against the Federation? Okay. Yet we're rooting for this specific ship within a structure that we are rooting against. Is that right?
So Starfleet is meant to be the Federation is meant to be the aspiration of what happens when we work together. So yes, they're kind of the man, the government of this, but it's almost like a United Nations where the spirit of it is togetherness and working together.
Coalition of the willing.
Okay, yes, well, yeah. We could do better. Starfleet is more the man. They are the police, the Navy, the colonialist arm of the Federation in the past. Now they're more peacekeepers. They're more prone to scientific missions, so they say, but that's not what we usually see on TV. So we should actually be criticizing Starfleet while wishing to be the Federation, part of the Federation.
Got it. Abolish Starfleet. Federation, get it together.
Perfect.
Defund Starfleet, I think.
Yes, defund Starfleet.
Working to abolishment. Got it.
Ravi, merch idea. Mark that.
Title of app.
I want writing credit. I want writing credit.
Yeah, of course. A little asterisk at the bottom. Elliot, I have to ask you, what the trek?
So I had 2. The first one was like just more episode based, but I think we just talked about it, and that was, can the Federation be trusted? There might be more nuance in that question. Like,
yes.
Oh yeah. So there's way more new. Like, we can get into it if you want. But they're building around this. There's kind of like again, a multi-series storyline going on. So several series ago, there was a group of colonists who were basically abandoned in a demilitarized zone and become kind of anti-colonialists in a way. And it's actually the namesake for our podcast is Worse Than the Borg, because the leader of that group describes the activities of the Federation to be worse than the Borg. So you're assimilating people and they don't even realize that it's a threat. And in this series in particular, there's a little webisode where the Federation is referred to in a pidgin name called the Vidrash, and they are characterized as a kind of an evil force. And that is like 100 years in the future from now, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. Yeah. So we're kind of like stuck in this, like, and this is the Star Trek that I've always wanted to see them address, you know, like, what does it mean when you're putting these groups together? Kind of maybe one of my theories for the burn is like, eco-terrorists who are, opposing the colonial nature and taking away their ability to kind of glob everybody in. But we'll see. I don't know if they're actually going that deep. I don't know.
Ravi, do you want to respond to all that?
With a small cap to most of the Star Trek universe up until this point, to this series, That's been sort of the common thing, is that it's idealistic, and to write better episodes, they've been kind of taking knocks at Starfleet and the Federation. But it started as a super idealistic internationalist view of what could be, in a time and place where everyone around them in their daily lives in the real world had no reason to believe that that was possible. So I just need to shout out the original intention. I think the Roddenberryan kind of view of the future needs updating perhaps, but I don't want to take away from its idealism, because I think there was a lot of value there. And what I like most about this is they don't just fall. I think it's very easy. I think Ronald D. Moore, though I love him, kind of did that too. It was too facile to just say, yes, underneath it all, the Federation and Starfleet are evil. And this one does a much better job of saying it's way more complex than that, and maintains and preserves and talks about the idealism and the values that underlie it, but then doesn't just paint that in a singular, okay, everything's rosy. It does talk about it with nuance and subtlety. So yes. I think that the fact that it doesn't fall into either or category, that it's this evil colonial entity, or that it's this pure, utopia, I think that's actually one of the reasons why I think Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Discovery uniquely, almost in the whole series, the whole franchise, is so good at what it does, is because it allows you to unpack it, but not just become a cynical, we have other franchises to be cynical and angry at the world with. And Star Trek, the beauty is that it kind of gets the juices flowing a little bit. It makes you think about what things could be like. And again, credit to the writers and the people who conceived of this series, because I think it dances on that very fine line in a way that makes you think. Because I sometimes switch off when I watch parts of previous series, oh yeah, they're all evil. Oh yeah, there's somebody stabbing somebody in the background. Yeah, okay, fine. It's too easy.
And relevant to this episode, I just want to add, they kind of characterize this with Sonequa Martin Green's character. So the backstory for her is she actually came through the wormhole into space a whole year ahead of everybody else, and has had trouble after spending a year basically as a space pirate, reintegrating into the trim and proper world of Starfleet. And as I kind of mentioned, at the end of the last episode, we were kind of like, okay, she's on her way out. But they instead, created that space for her to be her individual self within the group of it all.
Perfect. You took the words right out of my mouth, Ronnie. Elliot, you have
that
one.
Actually, yeah, that exactly touches on the other question that I was kind of asking. It's a more philosophical question I thought the episode raised, but in order to I guess win the T'Kal and Ket, Burnham had to complete that character arc. And I guess the quandary in there, and I was wondering what you all thought about that, is I think the question it's asking is it possible to act ethically or morally, without personal clarity? Does moral action require personal clarity? And I thought that was interesting, because the episode seems to be saying that it does, because she wasn't allowed to be speaking truth until she knew who she was. But there's some weird implications to that. But just wondering what your thoughts were.
Oh, that's so in depth. I love this line of questioning. I think that a lot of this season has been dealing with the individual versus the whole. And the character of Michael Burnham has been kind of our focal point of that fight. And she is, I think the writers are trying to tell us that there is a middle ground, that you can be an individual while still contributing to the moral good of the whole. But I mean, one of my main criticisms about this season is then that they kind of force Michael Burnham back into this position where she could have evolved into someone who wasn't just Federation or Starfleet. She was someone who was just trying to do good, which is, I think, at the core of the mission of Starfleet, but that's not what it's become. And I think it would have been a much more active choice to have her continue to do that and still kind of turn her back on her Federation roots.
Right.
But I'll pass it off to, I don't know, I'm going to put Ravi on the spot. What do you think about it?
Well, I mean, I think that part of it throughout the season, I'm trying to think, a big chunk of at least the last few episodes in season 3 and potentially even earlier is they have these striking revelations about leadership, all throughout this. It's how do you deal with conflict as a leader? How do you deal with people's trauma as a leader? How do you deal with mental health as a leader? And it really, this episode evoked this thing of like, okay, how do you deal with these tense situations when you're confused, when you're not sure of where you stand? I thought that was the most profound thing, is you can't deal with these things well. You won't have success unless you're aligned with what you're trying to do. And I think that's where, I mean, in the full arc of season 3, there are real important steps as we deal with world conflict and COVID and things like that. We're all asking these questions as how do we carry forward struggle and trauma and things like that? And how do you carry forward like disillusionment and confusion and all that stuff? You can't necessarily just keep marching forward unless you have those things resolved. So I think this was yet another instance. And again, if you're able to go back and watch all the episodes, you'll see that there are a lot of things that are framed. And this is where Shane jumps in and reminds us all that this was written like 2 years prior to COVID. This was written a long time ago. So
right.
An astonishingly relevant sort of perspective on what we're probably all going through. A lot of people's priorities have changed in a hurry in the last year. And I thought this was a really nice, like, no, get your stuff together. Like, think about what your priorities are, what your values are, where you're coming from before you try to take these things on. I really took a lot from that personally.
I love that perspective. Thank you, Ravi.
I want to take it and turn it back to the two of them. So just listening to Ravi speaking, kind of Michael Burnham participating in Starfleet, sort of made me with that description think, you know, every time you vote and pay your taxes, you're participating in a federation of sorts, less a coalition of the willing. But you know, we still do that. So when you're in the Michael Burnham position, you know, what do you do? What do you find is the morally right thing?
Let's go to you, Thom.
For the listeners, he's shaking his head.
I don't know. I'm having trouble contextualizing that, but I will say, I don't know. We all have to live in this system, and we should just do whatever we can as individuals to move the system this way together. And so the only thing I can think of it, because I'm a school teacher, obviously, and my school's a little bit behind the times. And so the best thing I can do is not sort of come out and be like, I'm gay and everyone now has to read these books and this and that. I just like casually bring in the books and like casually put up a rainbow sticker or a Black Lives Matter flag and like, you know, just ask people questions about it. That's my way of being like, all right, let's do this with sort of the most ease I can muster up, and without sort of, you know, demanding anything, because nobody listens when they're told to do something. They're not going to listen. They have to come up with it sort of on their own. And so my way of doing it is like, you know, just giving them maybe tools or resources or thoughts to be able to do that. And I don't even know if my description was at all relevant to the question.
No,
I think that was an exact response to my question. So thanks for sharing that.
Totally. And then also too, I just think, you know, like in terms of the internal struggle that Burnham's going through, there's also a lot of parallels. And this is something that you said as well, Ravi. I think, you know, in the discourse of decolonization, one of the ideas is that it's not just enough to be actively dedicated to, you know, like understanding whose land you're on and working with certain communities. You also need to decolonize your own history of settler activity and your own family history. And like, there's something about settling yourself in order to be able to be there in that action, because it's a collective action. It's not just decolonization. It's not obviously just like for Indigenous people. It's like to decolonize everybody, right? And like similarly in terms of, you know, dedicating yourself to anti-racist accompliceship and anti-racist allyship, it's like, you know, we need to unlearn these systems in ourselves. So it's not just enough to assume that you're like a moral actor. Like the work always needs to be going on inside yourself, which is I also think something that it was saying potentially.
Oh, absolutely. I think you've actually opened my eyes to what that scene was saying. Thank you so much for putting that into far better words than I ever could have.
And just to like, just to jump on that, just because it's something that I've been thinking about in the last month or so, what Elliot was talking about is the sort of fatigue that sets in after a year of a pandemic, after losing friends, after so much loss and so much life change. And I have committed myself to decolonization and anti-racism. And it's it's what am I doing now? I'm not doing anything anymore. It feels like it. I'm just sitting around trying to make sure I can get up and go to work. And so for me, it's such an interesting, I think this has to do with the like, well, okay, how do we make this easy? How is it sustainable? How is it attainable, I guess?
Well, like that's actually, I lost my train of thought, but that's exactly where I was going with that, is that in this discourse, it's like, if you have a mental illness and like, which, like I struggle with like depression and anxiety, and it's like, that's not a reason to not participate. That just means part of anti-racist action and decolonization is taking care of yourself to then be there to show up for it. Right. So it's like, it's recursive almost in that way.
Yep. That's beautiful.
Cool.
And
it's kind of like a season 2 timeline.
Yeah. Reset. Yeah. Perfect. And he hasn't even seen it, ladies and gentlemen.
I think Ravi had something
Ravi,
to
did you
add.
want to jump in there with something?
I'm listening to a good book. It's by the negotiators who did like
Right now?
Getting to a Yes. No, not at the moment.
I was going to say very inappropriate timing.
What?
It's by the same people who did How to Get to a Yes. So it's like that negotiation stuff, but it's a very good one because it's about power of a positive no, and it's talking about how asserting no begins with a really strong affirmation of what your bigger yes is. Great audiobook. I'm halfway through it. So far, so great. But I think that there's a part of this. It's like, how do you deal with these struggles that often, by the way, relate to a lot of saying no and saying, and putting a stop to something, and the idea of saying yes to something. And I only raise that because I've found that saying no in my day-to-day life, in my work, in my politics, is draining. Can be very draining. And I think that that's part of what we have to take pause right now as we deal with COVID and we deal with fatigue. And for people for whom COVID was just layer on top of other crises and other struggle. And it's actually just having those moments where we remind ourselves of the greater yes that we're working towards. And that's been long overdue during, like, we're just scraping by sometimes, it feels. And I'm saying that from a position of profound privilege, right? Like, I if it's bad for me, then but I think that that's really what it is that collectively and individually we have to be affirming those yeses, and I think that is the sort of federation, to pull this way back into the Star Trek universe. I think that that's maybe what I was getting at, is that it's not so just cynical and negative and saying, oh yeah, the Federation's evil, Starfleet's evil. It's like, no, there's some yeses in there that we really need to think about ourselves as a society, as humanity.
I would have loved for there to be a scene at the end where it was say no. Say no. Say no. Sorry, I had to do it.
It's just you. It's you, Shane, being like,
yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna pull us into the last segment where we just like all share our last thoughts about it, because my last thought actually connects into what
we're already doing
says.
it.
Yeah, the concept of absolute candor, which is fairly new to the Star Trek franchise. So the Quat Malat are like only kind of, I believe, came around in season 1 of Star Trek Picard.
They're less than a year old in our collective.
So it was cool to see something so, like, in a story that's been going on for 50 years, something so new in the franchise come into it. But they represent this, start from the deep truth. And the deep truth that they were looking for in this was not a like factual reality truth. It was, what is Michael Burnham's truth? And once she gets there, then she's better able to engage. And I think, Elliot, to what you were saying about decolonizing ourselves and getting ourselves, like, you strip down to that bottom level where you acknowledge like who you are, where you're at, what you stand for. And it's from that point that you can build back up. And I think it was really super interesting to make her mother that character. That was
the one questionable thing about this episode.
In your face parenting happening at the front of the
well, you told me,
panel.
Mom,
Yeah.
shut up, Mom.
But and then the first thing that she does when she gets there is to acknowledge that she's stepped out of line, and she steps back.
Yeah, and it works by stepping back and recognizing that the question that she had asked wasn't the right question, that she wasn't looking to reunify the Federation with the Vulcans and the Romulans. She was actually looking for the truth, and that's when she's actually presented with the truth. So it does pay dividends. Does anyone else have any final thoughts about this episode before we wrap up, as Ron said?
I wish I had a tribunal every time I had to talk with my mother.
We are going to need a quorum.
I'd be your partner in absolute candor, please.
With sword strapped to your back.
I just immediately throw you under the bus.
Yeah, you would.
Almost like her mother did. My only final thought is like, thanks for opening my eyes to this franchise. I'm so excited about it. I honestly really liked it.
I want to leapfrog on that and just be sentimental for a second, because obviously my friendship with Shane goes back, oh my Lord, 20 years.
Oh, let's not talk about it.
So, so it's nice to be able to, after all this time, sit down and have like talks about what we both, what connects the two of us, I'd say. And it's nice to see us in similar places. And certainly you were one of our Dickwick's very first guests, if not our first, maybe our second guest. So I love this sort of full circle season 2 sort of time warp moment that we're having.
I had all back.
I love it for us. I was definitely going to mention that at the end, but I'm so glad you said that, because this really is a full circle moment for me as well. And I am so glad that I could kind of introduce the both of you to something that is so important in my life. Clearly, I'm literally recording my thoughts on it every week. So yeah, thank you so much both for taking part, and the fact that you actually enjoyed it is a really wonderful surprise. I thought that this conversation could have gone a totally different way.
You had some great analysis. I really appreciate the digging in deep into what it's about, because I mean it's a tome of information and books and shows, and it all kind of circles around these actually very big questions. So
that was mostly Elliot, but I'll take some of that. Please.
Stop it.
You both did a great job.
As someone who's dive into it, are there any seasons that you would tell people to avoid, or is it just like a watch every single episode type situation?
I think it depends on you as the individual. I think if you like this franchise, the specific ones, like I was saying, you can start at season 3, episode 1 and be fine. But I think that you probably enjoy season 1, episode 1, and go through from there, especially it develops into this kind of old school Star Trek of courtroom drama and stuff like that. There are, I think, who was it? Our last guest, Erin, who said that she went, and there are Star Trek nerds who will filter out a lot of the bad stuff for you. So this episode was called Unification 3.
Oh, we didn't even talk about this.
We didn't even talk about it, because
that was my question. I forgot.
It's the third installment of this conversation about unifying Romulus and Vulcan into Ni'Var. Which the internet is calling now it's Vulcans and Romulans, which
I love that.
I really like.
I have some trivia about the actual definition of Ni'Var, but go on.
So basically, to summarize, a lot of this stuff you can, people are doing the work online. You can go and find what's important. If you really find that you like the subject matter, something like The Next Generation or Deep Space Nine is very good kind of background TV if you like to just have something on while you're watching that generally talks about this kind of content.
Well, really quickly on that, did you see the shady article that said Emily in Paris is the return of ambient television? That people should leave on in the background. It's the funniest thing that I've ever seen.
That show was so insipid, I wanted to blow my brains out.
We are all pronouncing it wrong. It's Emily in
Paris.
Right, sorry.
Oh, I've skipped the vote on that one.
I do just have to drop a little trivia. It wouldn't be an episode if I didn't say one thing about it. That Ni'Var actually comes from OG fan culture. So there was a fanzine in 1968, and fan writer Dorothy Jones, who ended up becoming a main writer for Star Trek, I believe, possibly Star Trek: The Next Generation. She came up with the word Ni'Var, which she claimed was a Vulcan word that referred to 2 forms. So this is actually a creation of a fan that has had a 40-year life of its own, 30 and some change year life of its own. So, fans making content making fans. It all comes full
Original
circle.
fan fiction.
Yeah.
That's
They
so
used to
cool.
do that. Paramount put an end to that, but they used to recruit writers from their fan base. It was a big problem. I think it's the Rick Berman kind of stuff, right, where they just kind of muscled out the fans for a while, and
Yeah.
look what happened. Hey,
Yeah. And I mean, if you're interested in like the franchise as a whole, like the impact that female Star Trek fans have had on the development of not only this franchise but pop culture as we know it, you know, like fan cons and letter writing campaigns and all that kind of stuff, you know. I think there's a actor, this is a piece of trivia from the last episode, but I'll say it because I think you'll appreciate it. The first iteration of Star Trek was canceled by NBC, and the fans, mostly women, organized a letter writing campaign to bring it back, which is, you know, we got some more of the cultural moments from that. One of those women went on to have a daughter who then starred in this show.
Whoa.
And it, like, just like this, that wonderful full circle thing. Obviously, you know, Nichelle Nichols as Uhura, Whoopi Goldberg as Guinan, and now Michael Burnham as or Sequel Martin Green as Burnham, that like an indelible mark on the way that we consume media.
It's also like women invented sci-fi. Like we literally have sci-fi because of women. So it's like,
It's so true.
you know.
And it's still relevant to this day. Like from Mary Shelley, here we are. It's we have talked so long about this. I just want to thank our guests once again.
No, wait, what? Sorry, I don't know if Ravi got his last fact in, and then I have one more thing because I don't think you have one more fact, and I
got my fact in.
Oh,
I started off this session.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. I mean, I could talk for hours.
Oh my
about
God,
this
pay
episode. It was so
attention,
good.
Ravi.
Sorry. But Shane, I had a peek at your notes, and you put a comment in about Burnham and Book. And I just wanted to give you a moment to...
Thank you for reminding me. It was my first note, so I truly did skip over it. But it is just so wonderful to see two Black characters happy, in love, and not facing any kind of personal or emotional tragedy related to that, their skin color, their surroundings. They just get to be two people, they just get to be two characters without any like of the emotional drama that we are so accustomed to seeing in stories about Black people. And I know that this is obviously science fiction, clearly, because that is not the lived experience for many Black people. But once again, Star Trek being such a hopeful franchise, to start and end the episode acknowledging that we can be happy too, and that there is a light at the end of a rather dark period of history is, you know, it's something that I always see, and I hope that the audience sees as well.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
Ron, is that what you feel was deprived of Stamets and Culber at the beginning? Is that what you were referring to many episodes ago when you said that portrayal was missing? We're opening up a whole other can of worms.
I guess I don't mind kind of spoiling this for the listeners, since we're a largely queer group here. But as much as I really love what they're doing with Discovery, we do have two pretty brutal bury your gaze moments right at the beginning of the franchise, and then again in this season. Like, the writers did not learn. So, you know, still waiting for that queer rep, but like, I still cried at Book and Burnham, especially because Burnham has been desperately looking for somebody to just like easily trust for so long, and has never got it. Also, this Book guy, we got to learn more about him. Like, he speaks with animals. He's kind of a Dr. Dolittle type, but they like did it in the first episode and then never revisited it. Like, come on.
Give us more. I think we're going to see more in the next episode. I did watch the preview and it looks awesome. Okay, I am officially ending this conversation. Thank you once again, Thom and Elliot. Thank you so much for being here. This was so great. Please, I know you have social media handles and I know you have something to promote. Elliot?
Yeah, if you want to follow Thom and I's podcast show, you can find us on Instagram at DYQWIQ. That stands for Do You Queer What I Queer, which is the name of our show. And you can find that across all podcast platforms. If for whatever fucking reason you want to find me on Instagram, my handle is @elliot.james.
And Thom?
Yeah, Elliot covered that. I remain anonymous for obvious reasons, or I at least try to.
Perfect.
But, yeah, you can also check our website out, doqueer.com, if you want to like see some cute merch or whatever.
Also, if you want to be a guest, you can go to doqueer.com and you can contact us. And everyone here having this conversation with us, we would also love to host you for a crossover on our side. So you're welcome.
Oh.
Can I just say, every time we say crossover episode, Mr. Peanut Butter's voice goes through my head. What is this, a crossover episode? Anyways, I'll stop.
It's a no from Shane.
That's a no from me. Well, we are at Shane Came Back, at Ravi Yi Joshi, at Ron Sly, and you can follow all of us on Twitter at Worse Than Borg and at Worse Than the Borg on Instagram. And you can email us at worsethantheborg@gmail.com. Please remember to subscribe and rate us 5 stars if you really like us. And as always, thank you for listening. We have been Worse Than the Borg, and you have been assimilated into our collective. But resistance, never futile. Thank you, folks. Hailing frequencies closed.